Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our 14th webinar for job seekers here, Employflex and Employmum. We're delighted to be here. So just a little bit about ourselves. We are primarily a recruitment agency. We specialize in flexible work, and that's part-time, remote work, obviously, job share, compressed hours, part-time work, and a hybrid of the above as well. So just to let you know, we have a couple of roles online at the moment. Ones that we're trying to fill at the moment are, we have a transfer pricing specialist in Cork, and that's part remote at the moment. So that's for one of the big four accountancy firms. So we're urgently looking for somebody for that role if you know anybody. And we also have a fantastic referral system. So if you refer somebody to us and they are hired, we have a nice little prize for you. So if you know anybody who might be interested in any of these roles, make sure you refer them and let us know that you are referring them to us. And if they are subsequently hired, then we have, as I said, a nice referral present for you. We also have a senior front-end React developer, and that one is based in Dublin. Again, it's completely flexible and part remote. And another job we're trying to fill at the moment, we're having difficulty with, is a quantity surveyor. So this is based in Cork, but is again part remote and very flexible. So if you know anybody for these roles, or you yourself might be interested in them, do let us know, and we'll have a chat with your candidate. So today we are absolutely delighted to have Justine McGrath from Proactive Coaching. Justine has been an executive coach and trainer and has worked as a qualified executive coach for over 10 years. As well as working with corporates in the charity and education sector. She has provided coaching to executives on a one-to-one basis for the last 12 years. So she gives talks at career expo fairs in Dublin and Belfast. So she's very well versed in emotional intelligence, which is what we're talking about today. And she is an advanced practitioner of the EBW global system. EBW stands for Emotions and Behaviors at Work. I'm really, really looking forward to this, and very interesting enough, Justine is also an author. She wrote a book about her father entitled Conversations with My Father, Jack Kyle, which I'll be going out to buy. And she's also published a children's book as well, so very interesting lady. So today, Justine will be chatting about emotional intelligence and how we can use that in our job search, and also if we're looking to change career. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to Justine. She's going to go through her presentation, and if you have any questions, if you hover over the bottom of your screen, you'll see the question and answer feature. So as she's going through her presentation, if you can just pop your questions in there, and she will answer your questions then at the end of her presentation. So she's going to run through her presentation. That will take about 30 minutes, and then we'll open it to the floor for questions afterwards. Okay, so over to you, Justine, and talk to you afterwards.
Thank you. Thanks, Karen, for that lovely introduction, and good morning, everybody. Absolutely delighted to be here this morning and to be talking to you about emotional intelligence. So I'm just going to bring up my presentation now. So yes, emotional intelligence, it's become quite a buzzword recently, and a lot of people talking about it because it is very important. So whether you are looking for a job, whether you are looking to change careers, whatever your current situation is, emotional intelligence will be able to help you, because it all starts with self-awareness and managing your state. And once you have learned to understand and manage your state and develop your self-awareness, you are far better equipped, not just in your career actually, but in all areas of your life. It's an area that I've been very, very interested in for the last 10 years at least, and I've developed, and as Karen mentioned, I work with a company called EBW, which stands for Emotions and Behaviors at Work. And they have a psychometric assessment that measures 8 traits of emotional intelligence. So one of the diagrams I'll be showing you today is one of their diagrams. So we'll get straight into today's agenda. So we're going to start with what is emotional intelligence and why is it important? Okay, obviously important to understand what it is, first of all. We are then going to look at Daniel Goleman's competency framework model. There are many different models of emotional intelligence if you Google it, but the one we're looking at is quite a straightforward one today, just for purposes of time and simplicity as well. But it's a very effective model because it shows the overall reach of emotional intelligence. We're then going to look at how you can develop your emotional intelligence through awareness and disrupting the triggering event, which can be the thing that causes your emotions and behaviors to perhaps get out of control. Then I'm going to give you some strategies for looking at emotional control, some tools and exercises. Then we'll look a little bit of good news, which is great. And I'm going to wrap it up with some useful resources. And then we'll look at any questions and answers that you might have. So please do feel free to ask any questions. There is no such thing as a stupid question. All questions are important and relevant and can often share. And what you're thinking is most probably what somebody else is thinking, or what you're wanting to know could well be, you could well be helping somebody else. So we're going to get stuck straight in to the definition of emotional intelligence. So what exactly is it? So there are many different definitions of emotional intelligence, and what they really all boil down to is this. Emotional intelligence is the ability to understand how emotions affect behavior and to act on that information. And the key point about emotional intelligence is the second part of that sentence, to act on that information. So it's all well and good saying, well, I understand how my emotions are, you know, my anger is causing me to behave like this. That's great, but what are you going to do about that? How are you going to use that to change your behavior? So it starts with our emotions, and then we look at how that affects behavior. And it's not just understanding that this definition is the ability to understand how emotions affect behavior, but it could be other people's emotions as well. So if you are looking for work or you're going into a new career, it's understanding better how other people's emotions are affecting their behavior. So why might that person be behaving like that? What is it that's triggering them? Why is it that they keep repeating that same behavior? So when you have a better understanding of that, you have the ability to make different choices. And that's what we're going to be looking at today. So why does it matter? Now, this is an American graphic by a Dr. Travis Bradbury, who founded a company called Talent Smart. Emotional intelligence really does matter, and it's really becoming one of the defining features in careers, because it is the difference between the people who just have the skills. So you go into a job and they're assuming that you have the skill set to do the job. That's kind of a given. But this is what sets you apart. So there was a study done at Harvard that showed that 90% of top performers have high EQ. And when we look at some of the traits of emotional intelligence, you'll see what differentiates those top people from other people. What are some of the traits that they have that make them stand out? And I'm sure you'll be able to think of people in your own mind, successful people that you can probably think, oh yeah, they're really high in emotional intelligence. And those people who do not have an ounce of it. Talking of America, I don't need to say anything more. So people with higher EQ make 29,000 on average more. Now, I think really this is just, it's quite a general statistic, but it's really about how people with emotional intelligence can propel themselves up the career ladder, because they're more self-regulated, they're better able to control their emotions, they're cool and calm in a crisis, and they have a deep level of self-awareness. So emotional intelligence is responsible for 58% of your job performance. So what are some of the traits of emotional intelligence? Well, this is where we come to the model. So we basically have the intrapersonal and interpersonal. Now, intrapersonal is all about the self, and interpersonal is all about your relationship with others. So this is the competency framework model that Daniel Goleman uses. And sorry, for any of those of you who may not have heard of Daniel Goleman, I should have explained, he's basically considered sort of the father of emotional intelligence. He popularized the book in early 1990, which was Working with Emotional Intelligence, huge, big, thick book. And he really has been working with emotional intelligence for many, many years. But there are many other people as well who have contributed to the field of emotional intelligence, such as Salovey and Mayer. So his model really looks at all areas. So if we are self-aware and we are able to manage ourselves, we are better able then to deal with our relationships, and we have better social awareness. In other words, we're able to see how other people react in team situations, how our colleagues might react, why they might be behaving that way. So what basically some of the traits are within that framework. If you look at the self, first of all, we have emotional self-awareness and accurate self-assessment. So we have a better idea of who we are, why we behave the way that we do, how confident we are, how we can develop our confidence. Within self-management, we're really looking at self-control. So whenever you have an emotion that causes you to behave in a particular way, you learn that that emotion is not helpful for you. So how can I change that? So we learn about adaptability, and that leads us on to achievement. We're more optimistic. Whenever you learn to develop all of these traits within yourself, you become a much more rounded, self-confident, aware, and much more controlled individual. So you're more likely to be high in empathy if you have social awareness. So empathy is really understanding why people might be behaving as they do and looking at things from their perspective. With organizational awareness, which is really important, if you become a manager in your career and you climb the ladder, you're going to be able to see who are the movers and shakers, but not just that, who's right for the right role. So this is obviously something that Karen is really good at. She can spot probably a mile off, people that have certain traits, certain abilities that will make them good in certain positions. And that's a skill that you develop, but it can happen. You can do that yourself within your own career when you start working with different people, and it's a trait that can be practiced and developed. So when you develop your relationship management, you have more influence. You're able to influence other people. You are a catalyst for change. So you're able to see what's working, what's not working, and it makes you a much more collaborative team player. So think about people that who always seem to have a cool head in a crisis, or they're able to really look at people, not just the surface of what they're saying or doing, but they seem to understand people at a deeper level. It's about reading body language. It's about being aware. When you are aware not just of your own emotions and behavior, but of other people's, it makes you much, much better able to understand and develop and work with those people in a team situation. Because the problem is, unfortunately, that a lot of us are walking around on autopilot. The psychologists say that we have around 70,000 thoughts a day, and unfortunately we don't make any effort to elevate those thoughts, to move to a different level. And this is what emotional intelligence is about. It's about being self-aware, so that you can say, okay, well, hang on, how can I actually look at this? This emotion is not serving me. And it doesn't have to be anger, or it can be anxiety, it could be panic, it can be fear, fear of speaking up in a meeting, fear of asking a question. Those are the types of emotions that you want to have a look at and say, okay, this emotion is not serving me well. What can I do about it? How can I look at this emotion and see if I can change it or transform it? And that's what I'm going to be giving you some strategies for today. So when we're looking to develop our emotional intelligence, we are developing awareness of ourselves, others' emotions and behaviors. And we do this through analyzing others, through self-reflection, and through noting feedback from others. So when you are aware of your own emotions and behaviors and others, and you can manage yourself to reflect that awareness, that will ensure that you're successful in different situations. However, it is very easy to say, but it's incredibly difficult to do. This is challenging stuff. It's all very well to say, we'll change that emotion, but we all know how strong our emotions are. They really do have control of us at times. So this is where the challenge comes in. And this is where two psychologists called Scott and Walker in 1997 came up with a theory called the business EQ paradox. So EQ is just your emotional quotient, which is the amount, like your IQ, but with the amount of emotional intelligence you have. But when we need our business emotional intelligence is really when we have the least motivation and mental or physical resources to deal with it. So if I could just draw your attention to this diagram on the right-hand side. So you're in a situation, okay? So you go into your office and somebody triggers you or somebody behaves in a way that you find upsetting, and boom, all of a sudden you feel like you've completely lost control, you just want to explode. So you go from the situation straight to the emotions. Now what normally happens is you react straight away, and you know, the behavior happens without you even thinking about it. What we want to do is we want to bring in awareness and choice. So if you can stop at the point when you have the emotion, then instead of jumping straight to behaviors, you can use awareness and choice. You're obviously going to be in a much, much stronger situation. So, for example, I can give you an example of myself. When lockdown first happened, obviously everybody was feeling extremely anxious, and I was no different. But I started doing a lot of work online, a lot of meetings, a lot of meetings with a lot of people on them. And it was, one day I was on a Zoom meeting and there were about 20 people, and I'm quite introverted, and I could see everybody's faces, and I just became overwhelmed. It was just too much stimulus for me to be looking at everybody. And I had a lot of these meetings back to back for several days in a row. So I knew that something had just caused me to feel overwhelmed. I felt a bit anxious. But because I've done a lot of work on myself, and I know to tune into my emotions, because I just wanted to leave the meeting. I just felt like I was completely overwhelmed. So they had a break in the meeting, and I went outside into the garden and just took a few deep breaths and asked myself what was going on, and I just realized that it was just too much stimulus for me. There's too many people. And so what I did was I went back in, and I thought, well, I can either just turn off my video but I realized there was speaker view, so I could just have it so that I didn't see everybody else, lovely as they all were, but I just wanted to look at the speaker, and it just helped to reduce my anxiety. So it's about that awareness in the moment, that there is something you can do. What can you do? Again, is it just a few deep breaths? Is it taking yourself out for a 5-minute walk? Is it trying to understand why a person might be acting in a particular way, or why you always act in a particular way in a particular situation? But it is actually bringing in that awareness. And again, not easy to do. And that's why it's called the business EQ paradox, because we need to do it. But that's the challenge. So I'm going to give you a little tip, and this actually comes from, this is part of cognitive behavioral therapy. But it's about how do we change or disrupt the emotion so that we can change the behavior. So if we are in a situation where we always behave, an emotion comes along and it causes us to behave in a particular way, identify that trigger. So what is it that's causing you to either lose your cool or feel anxiety or feel fear or whatever the emotion might be? Accept the emotion. Okay, the worst thing that you can do is try to suppress, or now I'm not suggesting that you fly off the handle and go into a rage. I don't mean it like that. What I mean is accepting yourself that this emotion happens to you, because trying to repress it is not going to help. So you go through the ABCDE model. Okay, so the A is the activating event. So what's happening to cause the emotion? Then you look at the beliefs. So what are your beliefs about this situation? So why is it that this thing happens to trigger you? So again, with me, I know that certain things will cause me. I'm quite introverted, so I know that too much stimulus, too many people, will cause me to become slightly, not anxious as such, because I'm quite a sociable person, but just I know that too much of it, I need a little time out. So I need time to myself when I've been around a lot of people. So Look at what your beliefs are about the situation if you haven't ever looked at that before. And what are the consequences? Okay, what are the consequences of this belief? Now, this could be a belief about, I hate it when people do X, or I don't like it when people do Y. So where does that belief come from? Is that something related to what you believe? And if so, what are the consequences of that belief? So if you could let that belief go, or you could perhaps change it or accept it, it might make life easier for you. But what you really want to look at is how to either change the belief, or if you can't change the belief, then at least try to disrupt the emotion. Okay, so the D is for disrupting. And then the E is going to be the effect. So this is something that you can try. Obviously, you try something out, you see if it works, and if it doesn't work, you have to try something else. Okay, so it's just a nice little mnemonic, A, B, C, D, E. It's just something to keep in mind, to try and help you to even, I just even have it as a reminder to stop the emotion, or to look at the emotion if it's coming up, okay? Because it's very, very difficult in the moment that you have an emotion. It seems to take complete control of you. So you need something where you are taking back control. You're developing your prefrontal cortex so that you can take back control of the emotion. Okay, so I just happen to like this quote by Jung, which is that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. So if you are going into an interview, or you're starting a new job, or you're looking for jobs and you're getting frustrated with things that you're seeing online, or unhelpful things, look at what it is that's irritating you. Why is it irritating you, and is it something that you could let go? Okay, we get a deeper understanding of ourselves when we figure out why it is that a certain thing is, and it's not to say that things aren't going to irritate us. Of course they are. There are irritating things, and there are irritating people, sadly. But if we can understand that actually at the end of the day we have control over our own thoughts and attitudes towards it, that perhaps we're not doing ourselves any favors by letting it get under our skin. Whereas if we were to just accept that that's the way that it is, and that's the way. So I, have just, since the whole COVID thing, I just don't bother with any of the, the attitudes, or the some of the things that I find on social media. I know they will just drive me insane. So that's an understanding I have of myself, that that's something I'm not controlling in myself. So I just let it go. So I just either don't look at it, which is helpful, really helpful. I look at more inspiring things. It's like garbage in, garbage out. So what are you looking at? What are you putting garbage in? Garbage is going to come out. Look at what you're feeding yourself. And social media at the moment is just a lot of it for me, unfortunately, at the moment is garbage in. So I tend not to look at it. So this is another little tool that I'm going to share with you, and this is about another way, and so as well as the ABCDE method, this is another way to look at monitoring and improving your emotional control. So I just want you to look at the box here, and you can see that you've got 4 different colors. So the axes are the feeling up on the left hand side, and then you've got energy down at the bottom. So if you are feeling pleasant, so you're in quite good form, you're all quite okay, you're quite happy, and your energy is low, you might be feeling quite sleepy or restful, or you're just totally chilled and serene, which is all great if it's a Sunday afternoon and that's all you need to be doing. But if it's a Monday morning and you need to be getting your head into the game for work, that's really not going to be a great box to be in. Similarly, the blue box is not somewhere you want to be. It's low energy and you're not feeling great. So I tend to find I get very low energy when I have to do administrative tasks, like anything financial, any invoicing or tax returns or anything like that. I can very quickly fall into the blue box because I just hate that kind of work. So I'm aware of that. So what I want to do is get myself into the yellow box. So the yellow box is where your energy is high, but you're also feeling good. So you're enthusiastic, you're motivated, okay? So it's just a way to say, where are you today? So how are you feeling? And it's a good way to tune in with yourself, because you can hit the reset button and you can say, okay, I know I'm in the blue box right now and I really need to get myself out of that. So what can I do to change my state? And there are solutions. As I say, there's nothing like a 5-minute walk in the fresh air. There's nothing like doing a yoga class if you can, or even just stretching, or anything, 5 minutes to change your state. You have to find what works for you. What works for one will not work for another, but you need to find what it is. So when I was giving you that example of being in the meeting online and feeling overwhelmed, I was probably in the red box. I was, my energy was high, but I was just a bit uneasy, a bit panicked. It was just all a bit too much for me. So again, I took myself outside, took a few deep breaths, looked at why I was feeling that way, and then changed. I was able to fortunately change the online situation so that I didn't have to continue to feel overwhelmed. So ask yourself, what could you do to change your state? So you can draw yourself one of these boxes. It's really easy. If you've got kids, get kids to help you, they'll love it. And you can change the axes to put on it whatever you want, but this is just quite a good, easy one to check in with yourself each day and find out how you're doing. Okay. We're going to be wrapping it up soon. So the good news about emotional intelligence is it's not like your IQ that most people say, is set, although I don't know about that. But anyway, that's another story for another day. Emotional intelligence can be developed. Okay, it's all practice. It's all about working. So if you find social awareness is your issue, you all might be thinking now at the moment that you've different areas of your emotional intelligence you want to develop. For some people, it's going to be the social part, the interacting with other people part. For other people, it's going to be their own emotions that are the issue. Whatever it is, look at that and ask yourself what you can do. So look at the area, whether it be empathy, whether it be social awareness, whether it be self-regulation. Look at all of those traits and see where do you need to develop your emotional intelligence. So I've gone through how to monitor and evaluate your emotions and behaviors on a regular basis. So you now have tools and strategies for doing that. The second piece that I would highly recommend, and this is quite a tricky one, but this is incredibly useful for developing your emotional intelligence. And particularly, by the way, now, if you're in a situation where you are job searching, this is a really, really good idea. And it's to get feedback from a trusted source. Now, when I say a trusted source, not your husband or your wife or your partner, and not a really good friend, because obviously they are biased in your favor and you're not going to get objective feedback. They're just going to tell you that you're great, and that's not really that helpful. What you want, and this is the tricky part, is actually finding the right person for this, because what you're really looking for is somebody obviously that you trust, somebody that knows you well enough, but somebody who can give you objective feedback without being critical. So what you're looking for is somebody to say, it might be helpful if you looked at developing in that area, without it's constructive feedback, not personal attacks. You want somebody who, and it's about going to them and saying, look, I'm looking to develop myself. I'm looking to be the best person that I can be because I'm currently looking for a new job. And I want to make sure that, I'm emotionally intelligent and that I have that as well as the skills that I need for my job. Is there any areas that you think I could develop in? So for example, I got some amazing feedback, and I can't believe I'm going to share this with you, but I am, because I fixed it. So what happened for me was I asked for some feedback from a colleague. And so they said, yeah, no problem. Justine, one of the things, now this was years ago. I do have to tell you, this was years ago. This was way back when I started my coaching. So we're going about 15 odd years. And anyway, long story short, she told me that I was passive aggressive. I didn't even know what passive aggressive meant. So she said, well, if you're in a conflict situation, instead of being able to communicate that, you just sulk. You kind of basically go into yourself. We all know that you're absolutely raging, but you don't do anything about it. And that was absolutely 100% true, because I didn't, at that time, I didn't like conflict. I still don't like conflict. Who does? Nobody likes conflict. But I wasn't able to assert myself in a way that was healthy, so that instead of, going to the person saying, listen, could we discuss this because I'm finding this very difficult? What happened was that I would just go into myself and I would, become very passive aggressive. So this was incredibly useful feedback for me, because it meant that I was able to change that, and I was able to say, okay, that's not helpful. That's really not helpful. And again, this is why I say emotional intelligence is great, because it can be developed, because it's about practice. So every time I found myself doing that, going into myself and not being able to share to do that, I was able to look at that and say, well, how can I practice this? How can I change this situation where I can be more communicative and get this problem across? So the other thing that I know, this is not for everybody, but if you really want to improve your emotional intelligence, and this particularly applies to people who struggle to control their emotions, and it's also incredibly good for anxiety. Meditation has actually been scientifically proven to increase the size of the prefrontal cortex in the brain, which improves our ability to focus, and we're less at the mercy of our automatic pilot. So I highly recommend it. There are many, many books out there about it, and all it really takes is 15 minutes a day. I'm just a huge fan of it, but if you don't like the idea of meditating, if it just sends your blood cold, meditating doesn't have to be sitting down and trying to quiet your mind. Meditating could be doing a jigsaw puzzle with your children where you are totally lost in the moment. Meditation could even be going for a walk where you focus fully on your 5 senses. It's a Buddhist practice called going for a walk to go for a walk, where instead of thinking about things, you focus on what you can see, what you can hear, what you can smell, so that you are in the moment. Mindfulness, in other words. Meditation, can be running and getting the runner's high, where you just lose all thought and you're just totally surrounded, focused on nature and your breath, as you try and get a breath as you run. Whatever floats your boat, but it's a good one to practice. Okay, so that's pretty much it for me. I'm just going to finish up with some resources to recommend for you. So we have, there's a book that I highly recommend called The Chimp Paradox by Professor Steve Peters. And it basically talks about how the chimp is the part of the brain where our emotions sit. And it's a very, very strong part of the brain. So he talks about how we can get control of that chimp part of the brain. It's a really fascinating look at the brain and our emotions and how we are, really sometimes at the mercy of our emotions, but how we don't have to be. It's a brilliant book. I highly recommend it. There's also a really good YouTube video, which is quite short, that you can check out by Professor Lisa Feldman Barrett, where she talks about how the brain creates your emotions. And again, a fascinating look at emotions. Daniel Goleman obviously talks a lot about emotional intelligence, but there is one article. Now, I think you can get this free. Sometimes if you Google it, it pops up for free. Somebody's offering it for free, or they've put it on their website or whatever, but it's the most read article in the Harvard Business Review, and it's called What Makes a Leader. And particularly for those of you, as I said, who are job hunting or job seeking, it's a really, really great insight into leadership and what you might be facing, and certainly even just for interview preparation, I would consider it a really good read before you go in for an interview, just to give you that little bit of inspiration. But Daniel Goleman's got lots of books on emotional intelligence if you're interested in delving in any further. He's just got a new one out actually that I'm going to read. It's all about the brain and emotional intelligence. I'm fascinated now by this whole neuropsychology area. But I like his book, Primal Leadership. As I said, if you Google Goleman and emotional intelligence, I think he's written about 6 or 7 at this stage, if not more, books on emotional intelligence. So you can take your pick of what suits you. So I think that is pretty much it from me. I would just like to say thanks very much indeed for being on the webinar this morning. I hope you have at least got one idea that you can take away. I'm just going to actually see now if there are no questions at the moment. So I don't know whether maybe Karen has an odd question or two for me there, or she has any. She's maybe taken some of them down, but happy to answer any questions now.
Thanks, Justine. That was very good, a very, very honest presentation, and that's a good takeaways there. Thanks very much. I thought it was very, very interesting to hear that somebody with high emotional intelligence can make more than 29,000 more than the average other person. So I think that's a reason alone to develop our emotional intelligence muscles for monetary reasons. Fantastic. So yeah, so look, I think it's also important to everything about what you said, so important to be self-aware, to be able to manage yourself, to have that social awareness, and to be able to manage your relationships. That's also important in your personal life, just as well as it is in your professional life.
Yeah.
And particularly when you're job searching, to be able to read situations, when you're in an interview scenario. I love the acronym, the ABCDE. I think that's a very good way to remember, to recognize the triggers that set you off, and then, to deal with that. And, I think at the moment that business paradox that you spoke about, when you're in a situation and your emotions take over, to be aware of that. At the moment, I think a lot of people feel very much out of control of their situations. That you're not allowed to do things, and you can't go to work, and if you're self-employed, that might have been taken off you, or you might be struggling at the moment. So it is really important, I think, to dig deep, and to have that emotional intelligence to deal with everything that's being thrown at us at the moment. So thank you very much for your presentation, and I must say you're extremely honest, telling us a few of your own stories. So that's always really interesting. And a few questions that are coming in now. So could you explain, this is from Mary, could you explain how to develop empathy working with people that you find difficult?
Yeah, so empathy is a really interesting one, and I actually do I do whole workshops on empathy. That's how important a subject it is to me. It's actually very, very close to my heart. And empathy is about, it's not sympathy. Okay, so the difference is sympathy is saying, oh, that's really terrible. I really feel for you. But empathy is actually about saying, I've been in that situation and I understand. Or if I haven't been in that situation, let me try to imagine or understand what it would be like. So it is genuinely really trying to put yourself in another person's shoes. As I always say, it's about looking at it from their perspective. Now, how does this help you if you're in a job situation, or if you're, so let's just say you go in for an interview and somebody is really, they're coming across quite cold, quite hostile, they're just not open, and the questions are really short, and you're thinking, oh my goodness. Now, what is our usual instinct is to go, what have I done wrong? Or why is that person behaving that way? So it is about saying, so what could it be? Okay, why might that? They might be having a bad day. We have no idea what's going on in their lives. And it's a tricky one because you're in an interview situation, you can't ask them in that moment, but it's about trying to find some empathy. So I remember one day I was on a call with a customer services person. We were having a problem, and obviously this poor lady was under a great deal of stress, and it was very evident. I could hear it on the phone from her voice, and we were trying to sort out a problem, and I was annoyed because I had a problem and I wanted it sorted out, but I could sense that she was so I said, it sounds like you're having a really bad day today. And there was just this really long silence, because she said, nobody has ever said that to me before. But she said, I am having a really bad day. I said, look, yeah, it's okay. It's all right. Like, I understand. And I think she was just so shell-shocked that somebody had actually, but that's empathy. That's just saying, this person is not being mean for the sake of being mean, or not being grumpy for the sake of being grumpy, or unhelpful for the sake of being unhelpful. There's usually a pretty good reason behind it, and that's empathy. And it just makes communicating an awful lot easier, particularly if you're in a team situation. So
very good. Yeah. It's all about kind of diffusing this. You can diffuse a situation by being empathetic like that as well. I often say I have a challenging person in the family, in the extended family, and my thoughts are always kill her with kindness, and that just kind of, even though she can be so annoying or whatever, and just, but if it might kill her with kindness, I just keep doing that, and it just diffuses it all,
And that's exactly, and that's empathy right there, that's empathy. And it just, and that's the difference between making a bad situation worse and making it better, so you're making it better.
Very good. Yeah. I have another question coming in here from an anonymous attendee. Any tips on how to display high emotional intelligence in an interview? And actually, this is something that we're hearing a lot from employers, that they're looking more to the soft skills from people. You know, like obviously you're in an interview because you've ticked the boxes and you have the necessary requirements and you know, necessary experience. But what they are looking now for is high emotional intelligence and the ability to be able to work remotely as well, and to have that those additional skills to communicate in a remote environment. So the employers are really on the lookout for this. So that's a really good question there.
That's actually, that's a superb question, actually. And I would have a couple of tips on this. So there's probably 3 traits of emotional intelligence that they want to see. And if you think back to the competency framework, it's the social awareness piece. So the organizational awareness. So you use the word there, communication. So are you a good communicator? In other words, are you going to be able to work in a team situation and communicate well with the other people in the team? Now, how do you display that in an interview is really by talking about it. So come with examples, come with stories, show that you are, and even by your presence in the interview, you will show that you are a good communicator. So, you know, your eye contact, your sociability, and remembering that the interview starts the minute you walk into the reception area, not the minute you get into the interview room, because you'll probably be being watched the whole time. But other ways you can display emotional intelligence are by showing that you are empathetic. Now, again, how do you show that in an interview? Use an example. Tell a story of how you showed empathy. So think of an example of hopefully you have a working situation where you can display that, you know, I was in a difficult situation, but I understood. I began to understand why this person was struggling, and I was able to help them to overcome their difficulty. That's high emotional intelligence right there. If you think about people in a team, who are the most successful people in the team? The most successful people in the team are the people who are able to bring people together and who are able to diffuse, as you say, or overcome difficulties. So instead of reacting, which is the lack of emotional intelligence, they're able to stop, take a step back, and actually in a calm, rational way look at what's happening and see, let's just look for a solution to this problem. So if you can go into the interview with an example of how you did that, how you overcame a problem with people, so that's showing your social awareness and your empathy. And it also is showing your self-regulation, that you have a cool head in a crisis. You know, interviewers want to see that you've got a cool head in a crisis. And so again, the calmer you can be in the interview. Show emotional intelligence as well in an interview by take your time, like take a few deep breaths. It's a very nerve-wracking situation, but if you can breathe, and so the minute they ask you a question, instead of just rambling out the first thing that comes into your head, blah, 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 you know, they've no idea what you're saying, stop and think. That's self-regulation. And even if you need to say, I just need to think about that for 1 second, that's high emotional intelligence, because you're looking, you know, deeper, you're more self-aware. It's not just autopilot nonsense coming out of your mouth. So I hope that's helpful.
Well, that's very helpful, Justine. And, you know, having those things prepared for an interview as well, you know, so, you know, be thinking along those lines, I suppose, before you go to an interview, and reminding yourself that this is what employers are looking for at the moment, you know.
Exactly.
So I think that's really important as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Brilliant. A question from Orla. Congratulations on your 4th webinar. It's actually our 14th webinar, would you believe? I can't believe it. So question for Justine: how can you improve your emotional intelligence through a redundancy process situation? And he's finding the webinar very insightful. So how can you improve your emotional intelligence through a redundancy process situation?
A redundancy process situation. So I am assuming that you're going through what's a very difficult situation, probably with lots of negotiations and lots of you know, tricky things. So I'm not sure whether the redundancy has already been negotiated or whether, well, it says process. So I'll take it from the angle that you're going through the process. So again, this is about clarity and about self-regulation and about taking your time. So always be prepared. Obviously, before, high emotional intelligence is really about preparation for any negotiation. If you think about any time you are communicating with somebody, you have a chance to display high emotional intelligence. And again, that's about going in the right state of mind and going in prepared so that you have the right information at your fingertips. But also, if you're caught out, or if you're caught in a situation where things are, you don't feel in control of the situation, ask yourself, how can I take control for myself? So emotional intelligence is about you having control of your own emotions and behaviors in that moment, as I said, in that situation, the A, B, C, D, E. But the way you can do that is even take a step previous. So before you go into the process or negotiations or whatever the situation is, be prepared for it. So I call it pressing the reset button. So pressing the reset button is about, if you're feeling frazzled, or if you're in a situation where, you know, things are not in your control. Even here's a really simple tip. Sometimes if things are getting out of my control or I'm not able to manage in the moment, just ask for a glass of water. If there is a glass of water at the table, ask if you can go to the bathroom for a second, or anything that where you are able to change your state. So anything that gives you a moment to gather yourself, or press the reset button. And pressing the reset button is saying, okay, not managing in this negotiation well, or this process, I'm getting annoyed, or I'm getting frazzled, or this isn't working for me. I need to stop, regroup, take a step back, and then come back to it. And you absolutely have the right to do that in any situation. But if you're talking about the redundancy process, if you can prepare before you go in and get yourself into the right emotional framework, that's even better. So again, deep breathing before you go in, whatever works for you to keep you in the right state of mind. So I hope that's helpful.
Oh, no, fantastic. Really good advice there. So just another question coming through here. Victoria saying, thanks very much. Lots of content there, which you need to take time to digest on, and
oh, you're
really
welcome.
thought-provoking and helpful. So it's nice to get those comments there. One other question now. What is your advice to best deal with being passive aggressive? So you spoke about that yourself, and how you dealt with it. I suppose obviously this person is identifying with you. So
yeah,
I suppose your a couple of tips to advise on how to deal with that.
Yeah, it's very, very difficult, because none of us like conflict, and none of us like criticism. And often we can become passive aggressive if we're criticized. Well, that's certainly, you know, how I tend to, you know, if I feel I'm under, it's almost like feeling you're under attack. Okay, so when we feel we're under attack, it's a bit of the fight or flight. So, you know, the flight is the withdrawing into yourself and becoming passive aggressive. So the way that I learned to deal with it, and the tips that I would have with emotional intelligence, are, it starts with self-awareness. The first step is being aware. So if you are aware, this is how I behave, then you have a choice. Remember, if we go back to the diagram, instead of situations and then just jumping straight to the behaviors, we go back to the awareness and the choice. Awareness, step number one. Okay, so I know in this situation that I behave passively aggressively. What is my choice? What do I want to do in this situation? So I have to be honest, it takes practice. The first time I did it, I actually thought I was going to have a heart attack, because I was so anxious just about speaking up. My stress level, but you know what? It was incredible how effective it was, because people are not mind readers. They don't know that you're upset, and you don't have to do it in a confrontational way. There is always another way. So I was shallow breathing. I was going, but I was like, okay, I have to just say this. I'm finding this very difficult. And even if you start a conversation with that, I'm finding this very difficult, immediately people understand that you are not trying to be, you know, confrontational, or that you really don't wish to have a confrontation, but that you are trying to sort this out. So I would say, you know, I'm finding this very difficult. I'm wondering if we could just look at maybe a way that we could work around this. if somebody has directly criticized you, it's about, I can choose to take that personally. I can take it on board. And sometimes I would say, okay, I take that criticism on board. If you have an argument to put forward, again, doing it in a calm, productive way. So I'm not sure I fully agree with that, but I hear what you're saying. Always, allow the person to know that you've heard what they're saying. I'm looking at your point of view, and I'm trying to see it from your point of view. I may not fully agree with you, but I will certainly look at it in myself and see if there's something that I can do. So if you remember back to the competency framework model, one of the pieces in it was transparency. One of the best things you can do is be transparent. And sometimes, as Brené Brown talks about vulnerability isn't a bad thing. Sometimes now in a work situation, we're all taught to put on our strong work faces and we have to be professional. And yes, of course we do. It's not about falling apart, far from it. But sometimes it's okay to say, I'm finding this very difficult. I'm trying to work through it, because it shows that you're doing something about it. You're actually being proactive. You're taking action, so that you're not just being the victim and going, oh, poor me, oh, boo-hoo, I'm the victim here. It's much more effective. So all about effective communication. And there are books on crucial conversations, I think is a really good one. Books on having difficult conversations, again, are useful if you struggle in that situation.
Yeah, that's all super gold advice, Justine, really. I think, you spoke there about being vulnerable, and I think from a leader point of view as well, it's okay to be vulnerable as a leader, isn't it? And it actually, you become more relatable as well because we're not superhumans, and at the moment we're all being thrown into situations where we've nothing to, no precedence on, so we're all in this new situation together, and it is okay for your leader to say, look, I've never done this before, and I might need a little help or support, or please give me feedback if you think this isn't working. Those kind of conversations don't make you less stronger. Actually, they just make you more relatable, really, and more of a human.
And just watch what happens when you show that vulnerability. It transforms relationships. It transforms communication. It's really, really powerful. Simon Sinek is wonderful on this. He is absolutely such a huge advocate of this as well. He talks a lot about this. If you Google Simon Sinek, his YouTube videos on this are superb. He has an amazing video called Most Leaders Don't Know the Game They're In. And it's all about this, about being vulnerable, but about being empathetic as well. It's definitely, I agree with you 100%. It's really important, and dear knows we need more of it now than ever. We need relatability right now. Yeah,
totally. Like that honesty, I think, is very refreshing. I think, when you hear it coming from at any level, really, not just a leader level. Just to put your hand up and say, look, I'm really not comfortable with these Zoom calls, or whatever the situation might be. And then you can learn from that, and maybe give training or support or whatever is necessary then. But sitting there in silence and fuming because you're not comfortable,
exactly,
isn't going to work, is it?
It's not it's really not going to work. Yeah, it really doesn't. It doesn't help. It just makes a bad situation worse. Yeah, for sure. It's not the way
what was that reference you spoke? Simon
Sinek, Sinek. So yeah, he's got lots of great videos, but he particularly talks about, he's very, very good on communication. So how we can learn to communicate better in a work situation. And he has a great YouTube video called Most Leaders Don't Even Know the Game They're In. Okay. Really wonderful on empathy and on this topic, of communicating better with people. It's fantastic.
Okay, excellent. Just one last question here from some anonymous attendee that they don't take criticism in the workplace well, even if it is constructive. And how do I start managing that?
Yeah, so again, that really just goes back to what we've just been talking about. So first of all, ask yourself, so put yourself in the person trying to put yourself in the shoes of the person giving you the criticism. First of all, do they have a point? Now, it's very difficult to be honest with ourselves, but try to look at it objectively. So instead, our first instinct is to feel hurt and to feel defensive. Okay, but if we flip that around and said, okay, let me just look at it from their point of view. Do they have a point? Okay. If there is some part of you that recognizes that, okay, not all of that is fair, but maybe a little piece of it is fair, work on that, take that, remember that I mean, people always say to me when I say, you know, it's not personal, they say, well, it is personal. You know, I work with this person. Of course it's personal. It feels very personal because it's criticism. But effectively ask yourself, are they just trying to get me to do my job better? You know, is there something that, so I'll give you an example. I worked once, I had a manager, and this was again, many years ago, and she gave out to me one day for being disorganized. I hadn't organized the office properly, and we were low on stock. I was supposed to order stationery and do filing and all of that, and the place had just turned into chaos because we'd been very busy. And I took it very personally. You know, I was very hurt, and I did not take it in the spirit to which it was meant. And luckily I had a very good, wise friend who said to me, well, Justine, has she got a point? Is she right? Because I was whinging about that. I was like, how dare she say this to me? And I'm so upset. And she said, well, is she right? And I had to begrudging, well, I suppose I didn't order the stationery and maybe the filing doesn't. And she said, well, there you go. It's not personal. She just wants you to get that stuff done. Yeah. So it was a hard lesson, but sometimes it's just about saying, can I take this one on the chin? And it builds resilience. And also it's great learning. I learned actually that I was pretty disorganized. I thought I was quite organized. I became much more organized after that. Yeah. Because I thought you know, my friend said to me, go and sort the office out, do half an hour filing and order the stationery, and she'll be delighted with you. And sure, you know, it's your job. And sometimes sometimes it's about saying, okay, if they have a point, if you really feel that it's unfair, then it's about raising that in an open, transparent way, but also not in a confrontational way. So saying, I don't understand. You know, I don't feel that I merit this criticism, and I don't understand. But sometimes we just have to take it on the chin and say, if it's true, maybe that's something I need to work on. And anybody that helps you, as far as I'm concerned, to develop yourself is doing you a huge favor. I still think back on that lady and think fair play to her, because I'm much more organized now, because I never wanted to get that criticism again, because I saw myself as an organized person. The criticism upset me because it showed me as a not organized person. So it made me change my ways, and I got myself together and got myself organized. So she did me a huge favor at the end of the day. I just had to learn. It's hard not to take it personally, but try and what I would say is try and take the lesson from it.
Absolutely. Well, I always prefer to get constructive criticism rather than someone saying to me, oh, it's fantastic, you're doing great. No. I prefer someone say, well, actually, no, your website needs a bit of work here, or, you know, I prefer that rather than just.
Oh yeah, because absolutely, how are we ever supposed to grow without it? That's, you know, and that's the thing. And all the lessons that I mean, as I say, the one on passive aggressive helped me so much, and that one on organized, and I've had many more lessons down the years, but they've all been very helpful. That's how we get better. So
absolutely, yeah. Okay, listen, we're coming up to the hour, would you believe? So where can people find you, Justine?
So I'm at proactivecoaching.ie. So just remember it's the .ie and not .com, or you'll go somewhere completely different. And I've got all my links up there, so you can get me on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter at Scarlett Justine. Yeah, but at proactivecoaching.ie, there's a form you can fill out if you want to get in contact with me. So yeah, connect with me on social media. I'd love to hear from you, and I wish you all the very best in whatever stage of your career you're at. It's tough times, but exciting times. You have to be resilient and look forward. You always have to keep looking forward, and there are opportunities.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, listen, a huge thanks to you, Justine, for being our guest today. It was very well researched and thought through, and I certainly learned a lot myself. So thank you so much for giving your time today. I know time is precious, so a huge thanks from everybody here in Employflex and everybody who's attended. And we will be publishing, or whatever the word is, this on YouTube, so anybody who had missed it today will be able to tune in and watch it on YouTube.
Great. Well, thank you very much indeed for having me. I really enjoyed it, and thanks a million for the opportunity. Really appreciate it.
Great, thank you, Justine. Hopefully we'll have you on again. So just let people know that next week at the same time, same place, we have Dave Barry from connection.ie, and he's a HR professional. So he's worked for years in different industries, and so he'll be there to answer all questions what a HR person is actually looking for in a candidate. So how to ace the applications, how to do well in interviews. So he'll be there to answer all your questions. So that's going to be a very lively session, I think, and he'll have some invaluable information to share with us. So again, thanks, Justine, and hope to see you all next week. Thank you all for attending, and if you can give us a shout out on social media, we'd be absolutely thrilled, and that'll be your way of giving back to us. So see you next week. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, Justine.
Thanks. Thank you.